Hello and welcome, I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Hamas said that it will not disarm until an independent Palestinian state is established, with Jerusalem being its capital, insisting that its armed resistance remains non-negotiable without full national rights. This statement comes as indirect negotiations with Israel over a 60-day ceasefire and hostage release deal ended in a deadlock last week. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says that the U.S. has the makings of a deal with China ahead of a tariff truce deadline of August 12th. Meanwhile, global markets have jolted after dozens of nations were hit with steep tariff rises as Canada says a deal could be weeks away. Russia says that 3 people have died in Ukrainian strikes on the country, and Ukraine says it has hit Russia's Ryazan oil refinery. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has again confirmed that sanctions will be placed on Russia if there is no peace deal with Ukraine by his deadline. It comes as U.S. President Donald Trump says he's positioned 2 nuclear submarines in response to war threats from Russia's former president. Trump and Dmitry Medvedev have traded taunts in recent days. Protests have taken place in countries including the US, UK and South Africa as fighting continues in the Gaza enclave. It comes as the United States promises a new Gaza food plan, while the Hamas-run Gaza civil defense say Israeli fire has killed another 22 Palestinians today. Meanwhile, the U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff has met with families of the Israeli hostages held in Gaza nearly 22 months after they were seized in Hamas's October 2023 attacks, according to the hostages' main representative group. He earlier also visited Tel Aviv's hostage protest square. Indian officials have confirmed that India will continue to buy Russian oil regardless of the recent threats of penalties made by the US President Donald Trump. However, Indian Ministry of External Affairs nor White House has commented on this issue yet. Jordan's armed forces has killed 2 armed individuals after foiling an infiltration attempt from Syria into Jordan. According to the Jordanian military, the incident marks yet another escalation along the Syria-Jordan border in recent months. Palestinian terror group Hamas has said today that it will not disarm unless an independent Palestinian state was established. In a statement, Hamas has said that its armed resistance is a non-negotiable unless an independent Palestinian state was established with Jerusalem as the capital. Truce talks between Hamas and Israel aimed at securing a ceasefire in Gaza has ended last week in a deadlock. Now we're joined by Ahmed Fattou. He's a spokesperson for the Fatah movement, joins us live from Ramallah. Thank you, Ahmed, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, Hamas has emphasized that disarmament is conditional with clear conditions. So how do you view this stance in the context of Palestinian liberation and the broader struggle for self-determination?
Well, we have been very clear as the Palestinian National Liberation Movement and a member of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. This is a national demand that we unite our powers and we unite our geographical and political lands in one unit, one government, one authority, one law, one weapon, and one national agenda. Independent Palestinian agenda, not attached to any external agendas, only for the ambitions of the liberation and establishment of the sovereign and independent Palestinian state. The Arabs and the Palestinian Liberation Organization and government has stated clearly to Hamas that we want for them to submit their weapons to the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, to the legitimate government and the sole representative of the Palestinian people on all international arenas. And therefore to go into a political process that will end into an independent Palestinian state within a defined timeline. That was our demand to the international community. Hamas cannot continue to deal with this national issue unilaterally. It has to come back to the PLO, because we have the power and the influence and the international relations and the international obligations to bring Israel down to end its occupation. Hamas has to relinquish its power and for the Palestinian government, the legitimate Palestinian government, to go back to Palestine. This is a matter of a national demand. This is not a political dispute, and we have to be very clear here. Israel is investing on the Palestinian division, is investing on Hamas' existence in Gaza to advance their schemes to liquidate the Palestinian cause. We have to be very careful, and we have to be very wise and smart to pull and withdraw all pretexts from the Israeli occupation to compel them into applying the international resolutions and to end their occupation according to UN Resolution 242, according to UN Resolution 338, and the last one, 2334. And according to the International Court of Justice, advisory opinion said that the Israeli occupation is illegal and must end within 1 year. As long as Hamas continue in that mentality, we are unable to advance forward. And we have to put Israel into its obligation. That can take place when we return back to power, and the Arab world has issued a guarantees that an international forces and we are calling for international forces to come and defend the Palestinian people from the Israeli occupation and aggression and their cruelty against the Palestinian people. This way, we are on a track into a political process that will end in the Palestinian independent state. We are very keen to achieve that. So their weapons, and let's say, be truthful here, they don't have massive weapons. It's light weapons. It's not a weapon that is going to repel or deter the Israeli occupation. And we have to be a little bit wise here, and Hamas need to understand that this will go to the Palestinian Authority. That is our goal, and if they work with us in that plan, we are going to force Israel to come down. The entire world is now seeing the horror of Israeli crimes and is in our side to stop this madness, because the world has discovered that this Israeli occupation care not about the international resolution, care not about humanitarian law, and they want to advance a colonial scheme. That is the plan to stop that forceful displacement scheme, and the plans of the Israeli far-right government to exterminate and liquidate the Palestinian cause. Hamas need to be wise, and it's time for them to go back to the PLO, because PLO is the legitimate authority and the one who has the expertise and the power to face Israel in the international arena and force them to end their occupation.
And Ahmed, now looking at the bigger picture, with the truce talks between Hamas and Israel ending in a deadlock earlier last week, what do you think are the next steps for the Palestinian freedom movement in pursuing both peace and their rights on the international stage?
As we said, we have to unite under the PLO, the legitimate authority in the international community. The world needs to pressure Israel to respect and to fulfill its commitments to the covenants that we had together on Oslo Accords in 1993. For 32 years, Israel is running from the two-state solution, and they are putting forward every scheme to undermine the Palestinian state. That's why they have been investing on the division, and that's why Netanyahu has been sending funds to Hamas for the past 17 years in order to keep the Palestinian division and to undermine a Palestinian authority and the Palestinian legitimate liberation organization. We have to be wise here. If our aim is an independent Palestinian state, and that's the aim of all the Palestinian National Liberation Movement, Hamas need to come back and join hands with us, and we have to be wise here and to pull all pretext from the Israeli occupation, who is taking from Hamas as an excuse for all their crimes they are doing. Everything is regarded to them is justified because Hamas did, Hamas this, Hamas that. When Hamas realizes that they are an obstacle, as well as the Israeli occupation is an obstacle for the two-state solution, they have to step down and come back and call for the Palestinian Authority to come down, and that will be, a great punch to the Israeli occupation to retreat and to stop. Because therefore we could face the United States of America, the impartial, the complicit United States of America, and tell them, here we are, the Palestinian people are united and saying that we want the two-state solution and have made our obligations. Now it's your turn to oblige Israel to respect these commitments for peace.
Yes. Ahmed Fattu, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your insight all the way from Ramallah. Now we move on. A former Israeli hostage, Tal Sholem, has released a video appealing to the public to pressure governments and Hamas to give hostages food. He went on to say that hostages were being held in tunnels, with Hamas withholding food from the hostages. Sholem also went on to say that Hamas was stealing aid. This comes as Palestinian terror groups Hamas and the Islamic Jihad released videos of two hostages being held in poor conditions. Now let's listen in to what Tal Sholem, the former Israeli hostage, had to say.
My name is Tal Sholem. I was held captive by Hamas terror organization for 505 days. I was released in February this year. Today Hamas released a video of Eviatar David, which was with me in the tunnels for 481 days. The video shows Eviatar in a really deep and extreme starvation as a propaganda of Hamas. I want to be really clear about it. It's the same tunnel I was held in with a guy, Gilboa Dalal and Eviatar David. Just few meters away, there is an iron door. Behind that door, sitting Hamas terrorists, a group of them, eating plenty of food,
Now we are joined by Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you, Mark, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, how do you think this public plea could influence international diplomatic efforts for hostage release? Also, can we trust this video that's been showed to us?
I think you need to also look at previous hostages that have been released, particularly Eli Sharabi, who spoke at the UN in March this year after his release in February. If you then look at the photographs of these poor people that have been taken as hostages and then have been taken into Gaza before that, and then look at their pictures now looking extremely gaunt. If you then go back to the hostage release and see how gaunt they are, they look as though they've just come out of a concentration camp at Belsen or Auschwitz. If you look at that, I think that is the evidence that is actually in front of your eyes, and they have suffered appalling atrocities against them. So when you ask a question, can we trust them? I would say to you that we have to look at before pictures, before videos, say with their families, to now, Asuma.
Yes, Mark, thank you. And now looking at this news, what role should international organizations play in securing the welfare of these hostages and ensuring that they are treated according to international law?
I think, as has been constantly said by other people greater than me, said that no army in history is also doing whatever it can to actually feed people that that they are then having to then engage, and Hamas hides behind the civilian population of Gaza. They have built a tunnel system of many miles. That's the equivalent of the London Underground, etc. It's extremely difficult urban warfare. The last thing that anyone wants to see on both sides is any tragedy of death. But this is down to Hamas using the civilians as human shields. Now, the Gaza Humanitarian Fund was set up to then directly get food in as best as they can. If the UN would actually work with them and other NGOs to actually work with them to get it in, to take the food distribution out of Hamas' hands, because Hamas then makes money from it. As much as this may be extremely uncomfortable for various people to actually listen to and understand, this is the actual situation. And then we have propaganda manipulation of photographs, like we've just seen in the New York Times, who then finally apologized in a roundabout way for that. Yes, this is a profoundly difficult situation, and people wouldn't sit here and say that people aren't suffering. But there needs to be an understanding that the aid, the food, is being used as a political weapon, and that one thing that Hamas would like is for the Gaza Humanitarian Fund not to be running any food distribution in Gaza whatsoever. That is one of the things that was on the table in regard to the negotiations that have just broken down the Summa.
Thank you, Mark Sutherland, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, in Tel Aviv, U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff told families of Israeli hostages there's no new progress in talks with Hamas. He called the situation complicated and said he understands their frustration. Witkoff shared that he too lost a child and he knows the pain they feel. He said Hamas is not honoring its commitments and that negotiations have been frustrating. Families desperate for answers urged the U.S. to do more. Many have set up a barbed wire protest camp to draw attention to the hostages' suffering. One family shared a video still showing their loved one weak and in poor condition. The push for a resolution is growing louder and more desperate. Let's have a look at what the relatives of hostages had to say.
Just came out of meeting with Mr. Steve Witkoff. It was very positive and appreciated that the fact that he sat with the families for over 2 hours, listening to every personal story and hearing each individual request, and he answered.
We spoke about the deal that is going to be all or nothing. We told him that nothing is not open for us. We said to him that it must be all of them immediately. All the things that the major things is actually the time. The matter of time is all the question. We saw our children are starving. We saw him there in the captivities. They will not be survive too much. It means that we have to make pressure by the government of the United States to make pressure not to stop until it's going to be done.
Now we go back to our guest discussion with Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator. Thank you, Mark, for staying with us now. Now, given this emotional toll on families and growing protests, what role can public pressure play in influencing U.S. as well as international policy towards resolving this crisis?
Well, one of the issues that's going on is when you've got Canada, the UK, Australia, et al., then turning around and saying that we're going to recognize a Palestinian state in September, what that means is that Hamas is then actually achieving their goal in this propaganda war, which is the eighth front that Israel has to deal with. And basically, they are then turning around and saying, great, all these other countries, plus many others, are agreeing with us. So in September at the UN, then they can recognize the two-state solution. And we will not, in all sincerity, then come to the negotiating table to release these hostages. The hostages need to be released immediately. If they wanted the war to end, then all they had to do was to release the hostages, the amount that are still alive, and also the dead bodies. My heart goes out to any of the families that are in this situation, which is extremely difficult. But this is a huge, I say it with utmost clarity, this is a huge propaganda war, and now we have Israel then has an international pylon. Now, very often, many countries have said we never negotiate with terrorists. The issue is this: is that the Hamas knows how to emotionally charge the situation, which they are doing. And every time a country, including the UK, France, etc., then goes, right, we need to put pressure on Israel to stop this because we are then going to negotiate a two-state, we wish to see a two-state discussion in the UN in September. What that does is then put negotiation in regard to the hostages, it then puts that back many steps, because Hamas then uses that again as a tool to get what they wish to achieve. You and I, as I have constantly said, we need many hours to go through many a long history
Mark,
and a long discussion on this matter. But thanks, Azuma.
thank you very much for joining us, Mark Sutherland, and sharing your expertise as geopolitical commentator, all the way from London. Now we move on to our next news. Jordan's military says its forces killed 2 armed individuals after stopping an infiltration attempt from Syria on Friday. The rest of the group was pushed back into Syrian territory. No additional details were given. Jordan frequently reports such incidents, often tied to drug or arms smuggling across the border. In January, Jordan and Syria formed a joint security committee. The agreement aims to tighten border controls, combat trafficking, and prevent the return of regional instability. Now we're joined by Jitendra Kumar. He's a defense and security expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you, Jitendra, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. Now, given these frequent border incidents between Jordan and Syria, what specific measures do you think the Joint Security Committee should implement to effectively reduce the tension there?
Thank you so much for inviting me. As a defense committee should focus on Jordan has full right to control its borders, Syrian border, where people are entering. They are destabilizing the Jordan. At the same time, he has killed the persons, and he has the right to defend their territory. See, Jordan has full right to use arms over the people, those who are not authorized to enter its place and trying to destabilize country and the economy. As a defense committee, they should recommend a peace between Syria and Jordan so that they can come to a conclusion where people should be identified that they should not enter the country, any country, illegally. And I hope and I respect every country's sovereignty, wherein they have the rights to protect their borders. And that's what Jordan has done. Already a number of Syrians have been in Jordan. They have been recognized by the Jordan people, Jordan country, and this is the act when they do not listen to the Jordan people. They have the right to do this.
Yes, thank you very much, Jitendra Kumar, for joining us and sharing your insight. Now we move on to our next news. The Trump administration is in active talks with Azerbaijan to expand the Abraham Accords. It is a move that could see Central Asian nations like Kazakhstan also joining the US-brokered framework for normalizing ties with Israel. Sources say these talks aim to strengthen military and trade cooperation with Israel. Azerbaijan, which already has formal relations with Israel, is seen as a front runner, though any deal would depend on a peace agreement with neighboring Armenia. Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff have visited Baku and held high-level meetings in recent months, with discussions described as far more advanced than those with other potential partners. Now we're joined by Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev. He's a former Indian ambassador, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you, Ambassador, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. Now, how significant is this Azerbaijan's potential expansion of the Abraham Accords?
Thank you for inviting me. I think there are a few points to be made about this announcement. Abraham Accord was basically conceived in 2020 during Trump administration's previous stint in White House to bring together Arabs and Israelis. 4 Arab countries recognized Israel and established diplomatic relations under this accord during 2020 and 21. Abraham is feted as a religious figure in all 3 Semitic religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. The expansion of Abraham Accord to Central Asia, including Azerbaijan and Armenia and 5 stans, would be a new thing beyond the Middle East, getting into Central Asia and in Caucasus. So it's a bit sort of deviatory, and it tends to hide the attempt by Biden administration and Trump, wherein they failed to persuade Saudi Arabia to establish diplomatic relations with Israel and join Abraham Accord. Riyadh has said that they won't do so until an independent Palestine state is established. So now the Trump administration wants to expand Abraham Accord in a different direction. Important thing here is that all the 7 states, 5 Central Asians and 2 Caucasian states, have already diplomatic relations with Israel.
Yes.
So this device would probably have lost much of a momentum. Another thing that needs to be said here is Azerbaijan is a neighbor of Iran, with which Israel has had a 12-day war a couple of months ago.
Yes.
So Azerbaijan getting closer to Israel under the umbrella of Abraham Accord would also raise heckles in Tehran.
Yes.
Further, Armenia and Azerbaijan are at loggerheads. They've had a war 3 years ago, under which Azerbaijan occupied Nagorno-Karabakh enclave and expelled Armenians from there. So Armenia also would feel a bit peeved, and an agreement between the 2 countries, Azerbaijan and Armenia, as a precursor to Abraham Accord expansion to Caucasus would be needed. Thirdly, Turkey and Azerbaijan have very close ties, and
Ambassador...
Turkey is at loggerheads with Israel. So those are the angles that would need to be tackled.
Thank you, Ambassador, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we move on. Ukraine says it struck multiple oil facilities inside Russia today, including a major refinery in Ryazan, southeast of Moscow, sparking a fire. It also targeted an oil storage site in the Voronezh region near the border. According to Ukraine's intelligence agency, drones hit a military airfield used to launch long-range drones at Ukraine, and a factory in Penza that supplies Russia's military with electronics. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Russia's defense ministry claims it shot down 338 Ukrainian drones overnight, while Ukraine reported downing 45 of 53 Russian drones targeting its territory. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev. He's a former Indian ambassador. Thank you, Ambassador Mahesh, for staying with us. Now, what does Ukraine's decision to target these critical oil facilities and military infrastructure inside of Russia signify in terms of its evolving military strategy and escalation in this conflict?
Thank you for having me on to this topic. Russia war has entered a critical phase, with Mr. Trump giving Russia till 8th of August to come up with a peaceful solution or ceasefire. Otherwise, economic sanctions a much higher kind would be imposed. There have also been a bit of a verbal spat between Dmitry Medvedev, the former president of Russia, and President Trump, leading to the announcement of 2 nuclear submarines being deployed in an anti-Russian posture by the Americans. So all that context gives a perspective to what's happening. On the ground, Russian army claims to have had some advancements in the east of Ukraine. Chariv Yar has fallen to Russian army, according to Russian claims, after a long bout of nearly a year. It's a strategic township that paves the way to complete sort of occupation of Donbass region. Now, we also have to check about 31 deaths in Kiev yesterday due to an intense barrage of drone attacks by Russia. So it may be a bit retaliatory strike. It may also be a strike to prove that long-distance drones manufactured by Ukraine itself have been used, and Russia needs to pay the price for its military and drone attacks on Ukraine, as it prepares for much higher dollop of assistance militarily from Trump administration.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev, for joining us today and sharing your insight throughout our news. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.